Hi, I'm Dr. Jason J. Campbell, and I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my videos. In this video, I'm continuing my analysis into Nietzsche's Will to Power. Specifically, I'm doing section 8.3 in the notes. Again, if you want to access the notes, just click the banner ad that'll pop up. It'll take you to the PDF, or click the link in the description field. The notes are going to cover notes. This section of my notes is going to cover sections or notes 171 to 191. So 171 to 191 in Nietzsche's Will to Power. So with that, let's begin. This is Will to Power. And this is section 8.3. And it's notes 171 through 191. Alright. Just to recap a little bit what we've done in the previous maybe hour and a half, 2 hours worth of lecture, it was important that we recognize the relationship between the moral agent and the significance of the moral agent's actions, right? And anytime we're talking about actions, this is just recap. Anytime we're talking about actions, we say that an action has to be informed, right? Right? And an action has to be informed by some series of events. Primarily what we want to do as a moralist, according to Nietzsche, is we want to make sure that our actions are informed by rational deliberation. Right? Rationality. So we want to make sure that our actions are informed by rational deliberation. And I've been drawing the same picture, 1,000 times so far. I have an ability to go into two distinct paths. I find myself at a crossroads. I decide to go this way because my action of choosing this way rather than this way was contingent on rationality, the use of reason, right? Rational deliberation. It was not the case, as is the case for the devotee, that I find myself at a crossroads and I go this way because some moral imperative told me to go that way, right? This moral imperative then does away with reason, right? So that you don't use reason in making actions based on an imperative. You just conform to the imperative. So that's sort of recap of what we've discussed up until this point. Now, with respect to action, we saw that for Nietzsche, it's important to get a step deeper. It's important to recognize that insofar as we're talking about actions, our actions should and ought to have meaning, right? We should be acting in the world, and this should create, it should become a meaning-giving activity. So that I ascribe, or I posit, or I create, or I introduce meaning into the world based on what it is that I'm doing. So, as an obvious example, the action of me taking out my camera day after day after day, doing notes day after day after day, presenting hundreds and hundreds of hours worth of lectures to the world for free is an act, right? It's an action like any other action. This action for me, however, is more meaningful than many of the acts that I do because I recognize the impact that my actions will have, right? It supplements Nietzsche. It makes more people introduced to his ideas. It takes something that's very sort of esoteric and dense and makes it a little bit easy to interact with, which means that more of the population will be introduced to these ideas, and that's the whole point behind my act. So my actions are informed by the desire to make more people readily available to understand and interpret and be able to critique and participate in a discourse on Nietzsche's Will to Power, right? Because I feel it's extremely important. What Nietzsche says, however, so again, this is all just still back up from the last lecture. What Nietzsche says, however, is that if it is the case that you find yourself, remember, and this is why I draw images because, I can't pull the text or the notes directly from my head, but if it's the case that you find yourself within experience, sort of embedded or wedded to experience, so that this box represents experience. We as human beings are wedded to experience, but if I am continually looking outside of experience to like an afterlife, right, and we'll call this the afterlife, then all my actions, insofar as I've rejected this world for another world. I'm always sort of fixed on the transcendental. I'm going to look back at this life with disdain, with rejection. And according to Nietzsche, this becomes problematic. The example that I gave that I thought was pretty clear was of a father who doesn't want to be at home, right? He's always fixated on leaving the house. He's always fixated on not being there. So when he is in the house, you can imagine what his actions will be like, right? So when the devotee who is perpetually fixated on the afterlife is in this world, in this existence, their actions are not going to be a means of contributing to this life, to this experience. It's not going to be, it's not going to contribute to the broadening of human excellence, right? It's not. What it's going to be is, well, you know, this is transient, let's concentrate on what's really at stake. Whereas an individual who recognizes that, as I said before, the time is ticking, and you know, my days are numbered, your days are numbered, all of our days are numbered. Let me try and live my life to the fullest. Let me try and maximize, you know, my potential. Then, you know, you can understand how their actions within the world, I erased it, but how their actions in the world are going to be completely different, you know, almost even antithetical. Right? So that's, for me, very, very important. So that's sort of the background spiel behind Nietzsche. And what we're going to do today is we're going to continue the discourse as he progresses through. And again, I want to be clear that everyone understands this. I'm not saying that Nietzsche himself constructed the narrative that I'm ascribing to all these sort of, you know, disparate notes, right? It's a lot of me that is synthesizing and connecting the notes in order to create a narrative. Otherwise, this wouldn't make any sense, right? So I'm willfully imposing my own narrative on the text, but that's the whole beauty of interpretation, right? That's what it's all about. All right, so to begin then, the nature of power within religious truths, right? So the nature of power within religious truth. All right, point one. There is an assumption that, and this is a direct quote from the text, note 171, there is an assumption that, quote, an idea is proved true by its effect. It's very important. An idea, and I'll write it down. Actually, let me write it in a different color, because I want to emphasize this. An idea is proved true by its effect. Okay, so Nietzsche says that an idea is proved true by its effect, right? And this is not what he's saying, this is what he's saying the institution of religion is saying, right? There is an assumption that an idea is proved true by its effect. And basically what this means is that an idea is true, the truth of an idea, it is true because it is effective, right? The effectiveness of the idea conveys some sense of truth. That is, the effectiveness of an idea is a demonstration of truth. Okay, so, okay, we get that. And I can give you an example. Let me think of an example. Well, I don't want to give that example just yet. An idea is proved true. No, I'll skip, because the example that I have has to do with Santa Claus, and it's just too early for sarcasm. Okay, number two. Quote, it was imagined by some power, if that power were not real, it could not be effective, right? If that power were not real within the idea, the efficacy of the idea, if that power within the idea were not real, then the idea wouldn't be effective. It wouldn't have effect in the world. Okay? Since it is effective, since the idea is effective in the world, what we do is we say that the idea then must be real. For those of you who know anything about philosophy, you recognize that this is immediately begging the question, but aside from that, it's an idea is demonstrated to be true by its effect if the idea creates an effect that resonates among the masses, then your idea is obviously true, is the argument. How do we check the validity of the truth of idea? By seeing if it